Imagine you're standing on the shore of a calm but deep lake. Out in the middle, someone is floating not because they can't swim, but because they won't. You call out, offer tips, even throw them a life jacket, but they just stare back, motionless. Then they shout, "Come get me!" Now, here's the question. If you jump in, are you actually helping them, or are you teaching them that they never have to swim for themselves? Carl Jung's psychology gives us a powerful lens for this. He believed that every person must face their own shadow, the hidden fears, weaknesses, and unacknowledged truths that live in the unconscious. Swimming, in our analogy, is the act of facing that shadow. But when we rescue someone who refuses to swim, we interrupt that confrontation. We protect them from the very challenge that could transform them. In Jung's words, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If they refuse to take that journey, no amount of your effort can do it for them. It's like planting a seed and then digging it up every day to see if it's growing. You're not helping it, you're killing the process. Rescuing someone too soon is the same. You stop the natural growth that only comes through their own struggle. Sometimes, the most compassionate act is stepping back and letting them discover that they can swim after all. In this video, we're going to unpack 7 deep reasons why you should not rescue those who refuse to swim, all grounded in Jung's ideas on shadow work, individuation, and personal responsibility. We'll explore how overhelping can create dependency, why struggle is essential for strength, and how your own savior tendencies might be keeping both of you stuck. But before we dive in, I want you to think about this. Has there been a time when you kept saving someone only to watch them end up in the same trouble again and again? Did you feel frustrated? Maybe even drained? Share that story in the comments, not just for me, but because your experience might resonate with someone else watching this right now who's on the verge of jumping in after a non-swimmer. Because sometimes, the best way to save someone is to stay on the shore. And that's where we begin. 1. They must confront their own shadow. Carl Jung's theory of the shadow describes the hidden aspects of the psyche we reject or deny. When someone refuses to swim, metaphorically refusing to save themselves, they are often avoiding their own shadow. By rescuing them, you interrupt the natural confrontation with their inner darkness. This confrontation is crucial because, according to Jung, only by facing the shadow can a person become whole. If you remove that opportunity, you prolong their avoidance and prevent their growth. When people refuse to act in their own best interest, it's usually because the act requires them to face something uncomfortable: fear, guilt, inadequacy, or deep-seated beliefs about themselves. Jung would argue that this is where transformation begins, in the raw moment when a person realizes they must act or sink. If you rescue them too soon, you rob them of the chance to see what their shadow truly looks like and to understand that they are capable of overcoming it. Rescuing someone who refuses to swim also reinforces their belief that someone else will always manage their shadow for them. This creates dependency rather than individuation, Jung's term for becoming a fully realized, self-sufficient individual. You become the buffer between them and their own psyche, and without facing themselves, they will remain fragmented and unintegrated. There is also a paradox. In shielding them from the discomfort of their own darkness, you increase its power. The shadow grows in strength when it is ignored. Only the act of swimming struggling against the current forces a person to meet that shadow head-on. In the long run, the pain of that struggle is far less than the pain of lifelong unconsciousness. By stepping back and allowing them to experience the weight of their own shadow, you are not being cruel, you are honoring the natural psychological process. Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If they will not face their unconscious, your rescue will not change their fate. It will only delay it. 2. Rescue without effort creates learned helplessness in psychology. Learned helplessness occurs when someone comes to believe that no matter what they do, they cannot change their situation. Jung's insights align with this. A person who repeatedly refuses to swim becomes convinced, at some level, that they have no agency. If you keep jumping in to save them, you teach them that they don't need agency because you will always supply it. This pattern corrodes the individuation process. Individuation requires the development of personal responsibility and the understanding that you can influence your own reality. By constantly rescuing someone, you unintentionally affirm their belief that they are powerless. The moment they believe that, they stop looking for their own strength and settle into passivity. Jung understood that growth comes through the tension of opposites, the pull between what is and what could be. When you remove that tension by stepping in, you remove the opportunity for them to discover their willpower. In your desire to help, you replace their tension with your effort, and their psychological muscles atrophy. Over time, they expect rescue as part of the natural order. There's another danger here: the rescuer's ego. Jung warned of inflation identifying too strongly with a role or archetype. If you always rescue, you risk becoming the hero in your own mind, feeding your sense of importance while enabling their helplessness. This relationship dynamic serves neither party. It keeps you trapped in an inflated identity and keeps them trapped in dependence. The healthier choice is to let them feel the discomfort of self-rescue. Struggling against the water, even imperfectly, gives them proof that they can take action. That proof can ignite a process of self-discovery that no external rescue can replicate. In refusing to save them, you may be giving them the greatest gift, the realization that they can swim. 3. It interrupts the individuation process. Individuation, in Jungian psychology, is the process of becoming your most authentic self by integrating all aspects of your personality. When someone refuses to swim, they are at a critical juncture in this process. The refusal often signals a confrontation between their current self and the self they are meant to become. If you step in and rescue them, you cut short the transformative crisis that individuation requires. Jung saw crises as catalysts. The pressure of being in the deep water forces a person to either cling to the false self or reach for the authentic one. This is where genuine transformation occurs, not in safety, but in struggle. By rescuing too soon, you preserve their false self, which may be comfortable for them but is psychologically stagnant. Rescuing at this stage can also encourage what Jung called persona dependency. The persona is the mask we wear to fit into society. If they learn that survival depends on presenting a helpless persona to attract rescuers, they may cling to that mask indefinitely. This stunts their ability to confront the deeper parts of themselves that swimming literal or symbolic would expose. True individuation demands that they endure the discomfort of uncertainty, fear, and effort. Only by navigating these internal waters themselves can they integrate their fragmented parts. Your rescue might feel compassionate in the moment, but it actually denies them access to the very experience they need for wholeness. By resisting the urge to intervene, you allow them to remain in the liminal space, that threshold between the old self and the new. Jung understood that this space, though uncomfortable, is sacred. It is here that a person either sinks into old patterns or rises into their own power. If you rescue them before they rise, they may never attempt it again. 4. You risk enabling their shadow projection. Jung's concept of projection explains how we attribute our unwanted traits or feelings to others. A person who refuses to swim might project their fear, incompetence, or self-doubt onto you, making it your responsibility to act. By rescuing them, you confirm their projection. You become the embodiment of the capability they deny in themselves. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Each time you act in their place, they feel less and less connected to their own abilities. Their shadow, the part of them they cannot accept, grows stronger. Instead of acknowledging their fear or laziness, they externalize it, often blaming you if you eventually stop rescuing. The projection becomes a weapon, and your compassion becomes the trap. Over time, this dynamic can lead to resentment on both sides. You resent their refusal to swim. They resent your withdrawal of help. Jung warned that projections must be withdrawn and owned for real growth to occur. If you continue to rescue, you block this withdrawal process, making it nearly impossible for them to see their role in their own struggle. Your role is not to absorb their projection, but to deflect it back to them, forcing recognition. This might look like calmly refusing to step in, even when accused of being cold or selfish. In truth, you are simply refusing to carry their shadow for them. Only they can integrate it. By stepping back, you create the space for them to see that the traits they admire in you, strength, resourcefulness, persistence, are traits they can cultivate in themselves. Jung believed that when we recognize our projections, we reclaim pieces of our soul. Let them reclaim theirs, even if it means watching them tread water for a while. 5. They may resent the rescue. It sounds counterintuitive, but some people resent being rescued, especially if the rescue highlights their inability or unwillingness to act. Jung's work on the ego helps explain this. The ego resists anything that threatens its current structure. A rescue can feel like an assault on that structure, forcing the person to confront a version of themselves they don't want to see. When someone refuses to swim, they may have already justified their decision internally. Perhaps they've told themselves the water is too dangerous, or that they're simply not a swimmer. If you intervene, you expose the fact that action was possible all along. This can trigger defensiveness, denial, or even hostility, because acknowledging your help would mean acknowledging their own avoidance. Jung observed that people often cling to their limitations because those limitations feel safe and familiar. A rescue forces them out of that safety into the unknown. Rather than gratitude, you might encounter anger, a reaction to the perceived violation of their psychological comfort zone. This resentment can erode relationships. You may feel hurt that your effort wasn't appreciated. They may feel humiliated by the implication that they needed saving. Both parties end up with fractured trust, which could have been avoided by letting them make their own choice to swim. By resisting the urge to rescue, you allow them to face the decision without interference. If they choose to act, it will be on their own terms, and their ego can integrate the experience in a healthier way. Jung would say that this fosters true growth change that comes from within, not from external pressure. 6. It can inflate your savior complex. Jung warned about the dangers of identifying too strongly with archetypes, especially the hero or savior. If you repeatedly rescue people who refuse to swim, you may unconsciously develop a savior complex. This is when your self-worth becomes tied to the act of saving others, whether or not they want to be saved. This complex can feel noble, but it's often rooted in your own shadow, perhaps a fear of being irrelevant, unloved, or powerless. Rescuing gives you a role, a purpose, and a sense of superiority. But it also keeps you locked in relationships where you are the giver and the other is the perpetual receiver. Jung would caution that this dynamic is not true individuation for either party. The savior complex can also make you blind to your own needs. You may neglect your own growth, relationships, or mental health in the pursuit of helping others. In truth, you are feeding your ego's need to be important, rather than genuinely aiding someone's transformation. Jung emphasized that helping must respect the autonomy of the other person, otherwise, it becomes control disguised as care. When you stop rescuing, you may feel an initial loss of identity. This is a critical moment for self-reflection. Who are you without the role of savior? This question can lead to deeper individuation for you, allowing you to integrate parts of yourself you may have ignored while focusing on others. By stepping back, you free both yourself and the other person from a limiting narrative. They get the chance to become their own hero, and you get the chance to explore who you are when you are not defined by someone else's crisis. 7. Struggle is the path to strength. Jung understood that transformation often comes through struggle. He said, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." Refusing to swim is a refusal to enter that struggle. If you rescue someone from it, you deny them the strength and wisdom that only comes from facing their personal hell. When someone chooses to swim to act, fight, endure, they engage in a form of alchemy. They take fear and turn it into courage, weakness into resilience. This is the essence of individuation, turning base elements of the self into something refined. By pulling them out of the water before they try, you interrupt this alchemical process. Struggle forces the unconscious to surface. In the act of swimming, a person meets parts of themselves they didn't know existed: resourcefulness, persistence, adaptability. Jung believed these encounters with the unconscious are essential for self-knowledge. Without them, the psyche remains shallow and undeveloped. It's tempting to think that saving someone from pain is kindness. But in truth, the pain of the struggle is what forges character. Without it, they may remain fragile, unable to face future challenges without external aid. Your rescue might spare them a temporary hardship, but it leaves them vulnerable to greater hardships later. Allowing someone to face their own deep water is an act of faith in their potential. You are saying, "I believe you can survive this, and I believe you can emerge stronger." Jung's psychology reminds us that wholeness is not gifted, it is earned through the trials we dare to face. Conclusion. So, we've seen that rescuing someone who refuses to swim isn't always an act of love sometimes, it's an interruption of their journey. Carl Jung taught that every individual must confront their own shadow, endure their own struggle, and take responsibility for their own transformation. When we step in too soon, we may protect them from short-term discomfort, but we also rob them of the long-term growth that only comes from facing the deep waters themselves. It's not about abandoning people. It's about respecting their agency, their path, and their right to discover their own strength. Think of it like this. You can throw someone a rope, but they still have to grab it. If they won't, your repeated dives into the water only leave both of you exhausted. As Jung might say, individuation becoming your truest self is a solo swim. You can encourage, guide, and believe in someone, but you can't do their swimming for them. If this video made you rethink the way you help others, drop a comment below with your biggest takeaway. And remember, sometimes, real compassion is letting them find their own way back to shore.